Okay, if you're a coach, this episode is for you. If you are looking for a coach, this episode is for you as well. Because in this episode, I'm gonna dive deep with a very special guest of mine into what makes coaching good or excellent, into all sorts of gaps in this industry, because there are. And so welcome to the From Grind to Grace podcast, the show for the alternative entrepreneur, the entrepreneur who is ready to flip the script, challenge the norms, and choose freedom first. Because when you choose freedom and when it's not just a destination, but it's the path, success just happens as a byproduct. And so the mission is to make that the default in our industry, to make it the new standard. Question is, how do you embrace freedom first? And so with that, I would like to start this conversation because coaching is such a big piece of the puzzle for every devoted entrepreneur. So I want to welcome, like I said, a very special guest of mine. In fact, she's a coach of mine currently. Her name is Femke, and I'm super excited to be in her program right now, learning a different way of coaching, regardless of the fact that I'm primarily a marketing and selling coach. However, my goal is to unpack what really helps people to step into that freedom and run their business from that place, not the other way around. So I'm so excited. Welcome, Femke. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you very much for being here with me.
Thank you so much for the invite. I'm excited. This is going to be a fun conversation. I look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. And I'm just thinking it's such a, every time I'm on a call or doing a podcast with someone across the pond, I feel, so it's usually morning for those people like you, like yourself now. And
Yeah.
even for me, it's supposed to be such a different energy, right? We kind of a different vibe, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, but I guess what helps is that, like I was telling you just before pressing record, when you get into the flow, you kind of forget about the time of the day.
Yeah.
So,
Plus, for conversations like this, you can wake me up anytime. Dave,
I
it doesn't
know, I
matter.
know, and that's the best. So based on my intro and what I was saying about stepping into freedom and running business from the place of freedom instead of the other way around. The way people expect that running a business is grind and eventually you somehow earn freedom,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
Gosh, I think it's the other way around, right? And I honestly wish I had known that when I started
Mm,
learning how to coach, when I started my coaching business. It would have saved me so much money on
mm,
business programs and marketing programs if I had known that it's freedom first
mm.
and not freedom last.
And so we'll dive into that for sure. Um, But first, I'm suspecting that losing money is not the only issue along the way because of starting running your business, from the other end, right? So with that, I would like to hear a bit more about your story, your journey, what you learned along the way, what you faced and how you came out of that, and how you basically came up with the method that you are now teaching to other coaches.
Right. Okay. All right. So I think it'll be good to start with like I am trained actually in accounting and finance, um, which is funny. Like always was good at math, and my mom was like, okay, so if you or if you love this, and I loved economics in school, my mom was like, why don't you study to be an accountant? And I didn't think about it. You have to just do the next thing in school because that's how society works. And
Yeah.
so I went to college, had a blast, partied for 4 years, and then I um day one of work, I was like, if I have to do this for the rest of my life, shoot me now. I can't. It was just not for me. And so um I didn't know at that time either that I had that being analytical, which I was very good at, highly analytical, also was part of, that lack of freedom. And so I found out, okay, this is not what I want. Had my, midlife crisis early, if you will, at the
Mhm.
tender age of 22. And so um, I was lucky enough to have a coach at that time because I was doing a management traineeship. That was my first job. And I had a coach,
That
and we
was in
did
the Netherlands, right?
that was in the Netherlands. Yeah. Yeah. And so I was deemed a high potential, became like signed up as a management trainee for an organization that did outplacements. And as part of that, we got a coach. And that was like back in those days, it's like what, 25 years ago? That was very novel and innovative. And so the coaches were not that great. Um, and I even had one of my coaches say to me at some point, um, what did he say? Insecurity doesn't exist.
Mm.
And here I was complete, like so insecure because they were sending me, to all these assignments.
What was
And
behind that? What was behind that statement? Insecurity doesn't
he had
exist.
just done this like leadership program that I had gone to as well, but he was so pumped up and excited that he
That
wasn't
was his way
navigating
to deal
where
with,
I was.
limited beliefs. Just
Yes. I
telling
mean,
you.
so I had that experience. He completely, ignored what was going on for me physically, which I think was also one of my first experiences of how I would not want to work with clients, but I had figured out pretty quickly that I wanted to do the coaching. I was very early on, I was in boardrooms with, like all men,
Mm.
and I had expected kind of like, oh, that, now this is going to be very professional. And what I found was that it so many emotions of everyone, and, trying to get ahead and trying to get it was like the playground all over again. And so seeing that and seeing all those dynamics and picking that up, that was a lot for me. And so I was like, I want to do something with that because I didn't see people actually be happy. That
Mm.
that was my first kind of sign of like I want to go into coaching. But then what? So I ended up doing a ton of coach trainings. I started with neurolinguistic programming, revisited that program, or as an assistant, I assisted on that program like 6 or 8 times, like somewhere around there. And I just continued doing trainings until I felt like, okay, now I can help someone.
Mhm.
And that took, like, for me, that took a long time because I had high standards, very perfectionistic.
And
And I
also
did
was
kind of,
your side gig, right? For a while, you still
it
had
was,
a job
yeah,
for a while. Okay.
yes. Yep. So basically throughout my 20s, all I did on the weekends was study and go to trainings and yeah.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit more about what you said about being a perfectionist or wanting everything, like you wanted to feel about very good about yourself that you're actually capable of doing this, because I
Yeah.
believe that so many entrepreneurs, me included, deal with this stuff. Like I was not telling myself I was good enough like forever.
Yes. Well, and I think that played a big role. So there was that sense of, and I mentioned like that they deemed me a high potential, right? I was very intelligent, went through school easily. I never had to like really study. And the message that I got from that was like, as long as you're getting high grades, you're good, right?
Mm.
And it doesn't work like that. So when I went into the real world, so to speak, after school, I didn't know what to do with, like my insecurities, my fear of failure, the not feeling good enough. So being put in a situation where um, I had to go, work with people who were 20 years my senior, it was so overwhelming. And then picking up all the sensations of like all the emotions of other people, um, that just made that worse. And so I was like totally contracted and, you know, yeah, like I felt, and especially when I went into coaching, I felt like now I'm going to work with another human being. Well, first of all, I didn't know how to regulate my own nervous system. So I was picking stuff up from other people, but I really didn't know how to handle that. Like feeling overly responsible. Oh my God, what if I don't get them the outcome? Like it was just really exhausting and tense. And I started noticing that I wasn't the only one, right? Because in the beginning, I was like, okay, there's something wrong with me. I must be, because I just couldn't. I was coaching, like when I was in my
What were you
organization,
coaching on
but
specifically?
any kind of outcome. Like in the beginning, I worked in organizations, so it was, people who had a hard time speaking up in meetings or had issues with their manager, so it was more work related. Um, and I honestly felt so there was like the not feeling good enough, but also not having the skills to
Mm.
actually deal with what was going on for someone because it was so cognitive. And I think that, and I didn't realize that at the time, but coaching, the way that it's being taught, is very cognitive. So how do you then handle the emotions that are coming up, the activated nervous system?
So
So yeah,
that's I absolutely agree, but and you think that most coaching still to this day is very cognitive, right?
yeah,
Because I've been hearing this as well. Like I've been in coaching for a while now, and the best thing I hear is usually help them with how to think, like metacognition, those kind of things, but still around everything is around cognition.
yeah. It's all about cognitive reframing
Yeah,
that, and it stays on the surface.
yes.
So what a lot of coaches end up doing is the moment that they hear a limiting belief, they jump on it. Let me reframe that. right? And so, and the problem there too is that it's superficial, it's like, and it's cognitive, and the focus is so much on finding solutions, which very often is an escape. Let me get to an outcome, let me find a solution. So if you get your client, if both of you are eager to get the solution because you don't want, your client doesn't want to be where they're at, then you think that you're doing a great job as a coach, right? Oh, now we've got a strategy, we've got an action plan. Now go out and do it. And then your client doesn't do it, or they do it, but it doesn't get results.
Yeah, and so this is so true. I mean, the whole industry is absorbed by more information, strategies, tactics, tweaks, hacks, how to catch up with the algorithm. And
Right.
so the big piece that I explore, and I obviously, so I'm a marketing and sales coach. However,
Mm,
I started noticing that people were not able to implement the steps. So the question was
yeah.
why,
Yes.
and that was such
Yeah.
a huge gap. And I mean, like, even before starting, learning specific frameworks, I was weaving transformational stuff into my coaching because, like, as I imagine that every coach who wants to give people results should be interested in helping them to get those results by helping them to become the person who can.
Yes.
However, what I'm noticing, and that, like you said, it's surface level, and in most cases, even if people get this advice, reframing, as you say,
Mm.
today, tomorrow, they are back to their old patterns, right?
Yeah, because they're going to get triggered, and the real beliefs that need to be addressed are hidden in the body.
Mm.
Because like if you look at the what a belief truly is, a belief is an embodied thought. It's metabolized. So, and very often that's out of our awareness. We're often not even aware physically what's going on, that we are triggered into something, because going into our head is an escape. And so it feels really good to to think that we have control over, oh, like, let me just think something differently. And then there's the whole push, just if you look at the coaching industry and the way that it kind of developed, because they wanted to separate themselves from therapy. They said, okay, like, we don't focus on the past or the problems, we only focus on solutions and the future. Well, where you're at right now and the decisions that you make for your future and how you view your future is based on your beliefs that were kind of like formed in your past. So you cannot like, transcend your current situation without looking at the past. But then at the same time, what I see in therapy is that people very often tend to get hung up on their stories, and
Mm.
that becomes limiting in and of itself as well. And so they don't end up transcending um, their escape mechanisms. Now it becomes kind of like they gather more evidence, should I say, through a lot of the traditional approaches in therapy.
Yeah, I mean, what we are saying here is that, in most cases, even if they do analyze a problem or that limiting belief, the real limiting belief is very often unperceived, even what
It is.
people think is their limiting belief is not necessarily the actual limiting belief, behind it all. What also for me what is fascinating and proves how many layers there are is when people, and including myself, right? Let's say speaking about money blocks or money limiting beliefs.
Right, right.
I learn this stuff, I read a book, I do some training, and in my mind, okay, I've dealt with this.
Yeah.
With this belief, I learned, oh yeah, money is good, is not the root of all evil. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I agree. Logically, I totally on board. I'm totally
Yeah.
on board. But then when I keep digging, oh my God, it's not everything. I have more. There is more. You
Yes.
know? So I guess what we're saying is that a lot of limiting beliefs people don't even perceive they have.
No, I mean, the way that I see it that is that we tend to work with what I call static cling beliefs. They're kind of just um, symptomatic beliefs of something that's hiding underneath it. And so I started to train people, like because I've been a coach trainer for a long time. I started to train people in how can you uncover that core subconscious belief that's really driving everything. And very often what's behind that is pattern thinking, like distorted thinking. And that kind of thinking needs to be cleared as well, but it needs to be done with the body. You cannot do that cognitively because otherwise you're going to go out, you're going to get triggered, and your body reacts way faster than you can, like have another thought about it.
Yeah,
So,
it's fascinating. And so on that note, I would like to go back into your story and specifically into how you evolved as a coach from where you said you were struggling
right.
with these issues, the lack of skill, the lack of even maybe self-regulation,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, it, to this other way, you know,
Right.
of coaching people and eventually developing your own framework, which, I know is very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I did a lot of trainings. I went through my neurolinguistic programming training all the way to becoming a trainer in that. And then I felt like, okay, I know how to run a process on someone. I know how to run someone through a pattern, but I don't understand how transformation works. And I'm lacking a system. And so I started Googling for that. And, this was like before there were too many options, because now there's also like the overwhelm of so many options. Um, and I found a coach training was a system, an overarching system for transformation. And so I ended up going through that again, became a trainer. I ended up being one of the 5 trainers in the world for that system. And I also was allowed to uh, certify coaches or certify the coach trainers.
Mhm.
So that the only other person that did that was the developer himself. And so I got very involved in that, traveled all over the world. And what I noticed is that, I mean, we had like, it was incredibly rigorous. We benchmarked 135 skills in a 25-minute coaching session. And then we had I forgot how many, 7 or 8 different models that we were using. So the overwhelm was real for people. And very often they would not go out and coach. One, because it was now like rather than it was too superficial, it was too difficult. Like, how do you handle sitting across from a person, having in your mind 135 skills and 8 different models, but you're also supposed to pay attention and be present with your client. It's like insane. And I'm not saying that it wasn't really a good system, but it needed to be streamlined. And so I think that's my superpower, is streamlining and synthesizing information, and I can also use my body to test, like, hey, does this work? And so I ended up creating a one model system out of that, and really and bringing back, like, I think we ended up I don't know how many, 15, 20 skills, main skills, but we really only focused on like 5 different skills that really made the difference. Because you and I talked about that, like, quantum leaping. I wanted
Mhm.
to know is, how does a coach get to mastery faster so that they can actually put themselves out there and get results for their clients, rather than wasting all this time, like, learning so many things. So I started calling that the 5% rule. Like, 5% of the skills that you learn in coaching get 95% of the results. And
Mhm.
so I synthesized that in one system. And a big part of that was that we started analyzing, I called it detection and analysis, on what are the distortions behind someone's beliefs. So all or nothing thinking, all or nothing thinking, confusing who you are with what you do,
Mhm.
having a memory that you hold in mind, like, and people literally hold it in mind, like, very often it's right in front of them and they replay that memory. That showed up a lot. So I got this, like, list of 7 things that showed up 95% of the time that you need to clear with your client. And so that's what I started out with.
So are these like these things that you listed, are they common for all people?
For
Or
all people, no matter what the outcome they're working on, no matter their background, it just kept showing up. So, and that's one of the things in going all over the world and listening to so many coaching sessions. I was like, hey, these are patterns. I started to pick up patterns. And then very often these distortions or generalizations, they showed up in clusters. So if there is confusing who you are with what you do, then very often there's also a high focus on other people's opinions of.
Mhm.
So so what I did was like, okay, if those all show up together, then we need to clear them together.
Mhm.
And so that, like, that's the first step that I took to streamlining and getting to my own system.
So interesting, and I just realized, and correct me if I'm wrong, just to
Mm.
summarize a little bit. So there are known limiting beliefs or distortions. And I think what most coaches in the industry do, they just go to those straight to those distortions or limiting beliefs and tell people what to think instead. And that's it.
Yes.
With your method, we get the person to see that for themselves. This is,
Well, yeah, that's step one. Absolutely. But
yeah, like they
I think,
feel it, they see it, they feel it rather than just being told, you know what, you shouldn't care about what other people think. And
right, yeah. Yes, logically, I understand that. My
yeah.
body is not on board with that. Yeah, and I think also, um, most coaches, they will focus on what I call symptomatic distortion. So they will focus on mind reading or blaming, not so much blaming even, but shoulding is a big one, right? Oh, I hear language where that my client is shoulding. So I'm going to interrupt my client and immediately address the shoulding. But shoulding is an escape. It's a symptom. It's not the actual core. And when you address that, you're not going to get lasting change. So patience for a lot of coaches, and then understanding, hey, how do I dive deep and get to the core as quickly as possible? That was always, I want to get amazing results. That's also why it took so long for me to get started, because if you're working with someone, you want to get them results, right? It's not just about, hey, I'm charging high ticket and I'm doing so well, but my clients are not getting the results that they are paying for. I mean, that I think is a secret that a lot of coaches hold, is that they are charging money, but they really don't see the results. And I think there's a lot of shame around that. And so, because I always saw, like, there's people that have that really high, like, I need to be able to get results first, and perfectionism comes into play there, and they never get started. And people that get started become successful, but then they realize, hey, I'm watching my clients not get the results that they're paying me for. And then there's a lot of shame around it. So I wanted to, my vision has always been, if I can help one person find their light, their color, then they can touch so many more people. And together we can bring a positive change in this world and bring more kindness and connectedness and stuff like that. So that's always been behind the work that I do, and the streamlining of a system was my way of doing that and sharing that with people. And what was really interesting, because you talked about not being good enough, right? And that showed up time and time again, that confusing who you are with what you do, and that your value is somehow conditional to your success, that showed up time and time again. It was that and the fear of rejection and abandonment. And so, like, in looking for patterns, those two kept coming up time and time again. And so I was teaching my coaches how to address that and how to shift that. And we were getting really good results, my clients, their clients. And yet I felt that there was a invisible ceiling, right? I could see that people were now doing good. I didn't feel like a lot of them were really jumping into that doing great, right? And into that freedom that you talked about in the beginning. And it wasn't until I read an article from one of my friends that I realized what had been missing. And in the article, she mentions a book by Greg Braden, The Divine Matrix. And she mentioned specifically the 3 core universal fears. And the first one is the fear of not being good enough. And I'm like, check. And then the second one is the fear of abandonment and rejection. And I was like, check. And the third one was less of a check and more of a slap in the face, because it said the fear of trust. And so that was the fear of letting go of control. And not one time had that shown up in my work, but I realized that's my blind spot. And so I had to look at myself like, oh my God, I have lived most of my life in contraction, in control. And that started, I think that was 2019, maybe 2018. I don't remember exactly when that was, but it blew my whole, like, what I thought was like the best system in the world. It blew that wide open, and I could see like I had such a major blind spot to control, and it does not come up in coaching, even when you're asking very specific questions to uncover someone's beliefs. And so I started exploring, how does this work? How does letting go of control work?
And
And how
also,
does
I
trust work?
I I want to hear about it, but
Yeah.
also, why did you have that blind spot?
Oh my
Did you not
goodness.
see it
I
that
could not see it because I was in it.
because you were in it?
I then, and I talked about like being very analytical, right?
Yeah.
And that was my way of having control, or trying to have control. And I think my dad died at a very young age. I was 9 when he died. Um, which, and the circumstances around it were very traumatic. Um, and I think like, so that kind of trauma made me feel so incredibly powerless and so deeply disappointed in life and hurt, um, that I think I just contracted around it. But even like, in all honesty, even before that, I think I was very, um, like, in my family system, um, I had some very dominant or domineering people, and I always felt powerless from a very young age. And so I just like physically contracted around that to to um to cope with, like, I very highly sensitive. I picked up a lot of subliminal emotions in people, didn't know what to do with that. And so the way that I escaped, because I call those escapes, is in my head rather than being in my body. And so it was like, even as a kid, I remember trying out for a musical for dance, and they, like, the teachers commented on how stiff I was in my body. And so, yeah, letting go of control was not my
So
thing.
interesting. It's so interesting, when you said stiff. So normally when we say someone is stiff, we put it down to lack of just general physical flexibility or
Yeah, yeah.
so it can be so, I know, mental.
It, like, for me, it was totally like, well, mental, and I think very emotional, because I
Yeah.
had just learned to kind of, that's how I learned to protect my essence, because it didn't feel safe. And I mean, like, I could talk for hours about this,
It's
but I
it's
think,
and for me, because I practice yoga. I
mm,
am a yoga teacher. Well, I don't teach yoga per se, but I could. So, stiffness and flexibility is such an important topic, right? And now,
well, and I did yoga
oh,
for like a
you're not
while.
flexible. Oh, so maybe it's not even about your body.
No, like, and then, like, you're like, because I remember doing yoga, and it was such a head thing, like, I have to relax, and, like, forcing my
Mhm.
body to relax. And of course,
Right.
doesn't work, right? So, I mean, that, I think that was such a eye opener for me, was that, oh my God, I am such a control freak. And people don't realize what control freak really looks like, because it's not, I never really felt like, oh, I want to control other people,
Mm-hmm.
right? I wanted to control, like, how the world affected me.
And
And
yourself.
Yeah, so even like things like getting confused or feeling overwhelmed, those are all ways of trying to get back control. It
Mhm.
doesn't feel like that because it feels out of control, but in all the research that I've done since that moment and all the people that I've interviewed, it's not just trying to control other people or things or keeping like a list or stuff like that that is an effort to control, but even anxiety is a control mechanism, or
Mm.
overwhelm or confusion or not knowing, drawing a blank. All of those things are ways in which we try and control.
And that's where we lose the ability to feel free, freedom.
100%. Yes. Because, well, now we're getting into what that control really is all about. Because as I started researching that, what I did, so here's what I discovered. Because very often when we focus on an activated nervous system, right, fight, flight, freeze, and 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 the contraction that happens in our body, um, the focus is on relaxing that contraction, right? And
Mhm.
where does that trauma come from, and healing that trauma. And they talk about healing the nervous system. Your nervous system is working perfectly. It does not need to be healed at all. It's not a problem. It's actually doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. But it's what's hiding behind that that is the problem, because there's so much
Basically, what
distortion.
triggers your nervous system to react
Yes,
one way or another, right?
exactly. And so I knew that, we needed to go from that lack of safety and the need for control to trust. And I wanted to know, how do you do that? And in that process, what I discovered, because you're talking about freedom, what I discovered is that right before the contraction happens in your body, right before you go into fear or anger or numbness, um, there's a link between, so something externally happens that triggers you, and
Mhm.
the first thing that your body registers is, I am not in control of something. Which makes sense, right? Because our nervous system would never need to get activated if we felt in charge of something, right? So the first thing that happens is your body registers, I am not in control here of whatever that might be. And that sensation is a sensation of relaxation in the body. Most people don't feel that anymore. They are so in immediate contraction around it that they don't even notice
And I
that their
think
body
that
is relaxing.
my assumption, or my assumption is that one of the ways or one of the reasons why we do it, especially as on entrepreneurs, and maybe actually overall in our society, because giving up is not accepted.
Wow, no, that's, yeah.
That would kind of mean I give up,
Mm.
or
And
I
I
need
think
to do
that,
something about it. I need to control it. I need to.
yeah, and giving up is like one really great example of that, right? I'm giving up. Um, or but it shows up in so many different ways for people, that sensation of, like, in a way, powerlessness, of this is out of my hands. The reason why we contract around that is because that sensation of it's out of my hands, that sensation of relaxation, is deeply connected to a person's core pain. And that core pain very often is heartbreak or grief or a deep sense of aloneness separation, abandonment. And so, and if you think about it, it makes total sense, because as kids, and we could go into like societal conditioning, but I think it's not just trauma that creates this connection. It's almost just being born, we become very aware that there is separation and that we're no longer kind of one. And that awareness of separation, and then going through like upbringing where our parents are now the source of unconditional love, which they're not designed to give us unconditional love. There's a lot of situations where as kids we feel very powerful and very hurt at the same time.
Oh my God, and you actually, you touched on such a sensitive topic. I used to think about on to myself, maybe chatted with a few friends. I think so being born is, sort of a like almost traumatic experience. But
Yeah,
also, I think up until you are age 1 year old or something, you are one with your mother. You don't understand that you are a separate entity from your
exactly.
mother. But what do we do now in this society to babies?
Yeah, we separate them.
Like we put them, I stayed at home with my daughter. But in most cases, it's like we put them in childcare at such an
Yeah,
early,
yeah,
it's just like like right now, it's like my blood is almost boiling just thinking about it. Also, the sleep training at, I think it's 4 months when they suggest you should start sleep training, leave them overnight for 3 nights,
yeah.
maybe get a stranger into the house so that you don't get involved and go through all the heartbreak and whatever. But what does that do to the baby?
Yeah, oh, 100. And I've seen this because, like, my son had a very traumatic birth. I was very ill. He had to be induced, and he couldn't breathe because he was a preemie. And so they whisked him away, spend two weeks in NICU. Coming home, if he couldn't see me, he would be like 2 weeks old in his crib. If he couldn't see me, he would scream bloody murder. Like, and he would not let anyone other than me console him. And like, looking back, because you can visit, but it's like twice or three times a day, all through the night they're alone. And what happens, they stop crying, but their cortisol levels are really high, and I can see the effects that it has on my kid.
Mm,
um so I think, like, so there's so many things where as kids we feel so powerless and so alone, and like, I'm getting goosebumps.
mm,
This is something that keeps coming up with my clients, is that if I feel the sensation of this is out of my hands, that leads me to being alone. And it's like this depth of aloneness that is so painful that the body can't help but contract around it. And yes, there's a lot of people have like a lot of evidence to support that core belief of I'm all alone in this world, the universe is against me, God hates me. Um, for some people, because it's like not um, a religious thing, right? It's for some people, it's like, oh, it's in my DNA that I don't get to have what I want.
mm,
Whatever, but it keeps leading back to I don't get to have what I want. I'm all alone in this world, and there's nothing I can do about it. And that kind of, like, I call that the doom loop. So it goes from like I'm triggered because someone I'm trying to post on Facebook. Like, it can be something that simple. I'm running a business, I need to post on Facebook, but I keep getting stuck. I don't know what to write. That's an escape. What are you escaping? Well, what often happens is that what's out of our hands is the opinions of others and what they might do. And so that sensation of relaxation in the body triggers that I'm all alone. So they go from posting something on Facebook to all the way up to I'm all alone, nobody wants me, and there's nothing I can do about it. And it goes so, like, in a split second that happens, and they get distracted. Their body, and I call, like, I always tell my clients, you love yourself so much that you protect yourself by distracting yourself. It
Mm,
doesn't feel like self-love, but
right.
it is
Wow.
so, like, it's so
Mm,
deeply loving. And then we try to fix it because the distraction is bothersome, right? And so then we judge the distraction, we start forcing ourselves to stay focused and doing all kinds of things, but it doesn't work because you haven't solved what's underneath. And so what really needs to happen is to build that tolerance for the sensation of powerlessness. So I like, it's basically changing your relationship with the unknown, with what is out of your hands.
yeah.
And so if you talk about freedom, because so many people want to go to abundance, freedom, carefreeness, joy, you know what you need to do for to be able to have access to all of those things? Surrender. You need to hand stuff over to your body, to the future, to the unknown, right? You need to let your intuition take over. You're letting go of control of what you say, what your body does. And so all of those things can be very triggering. That's why you see people who do a traditional approach, like a strategy, it might actually end up working, and then they have a big freak out and they self-sabotage because success,
Yeah.
intimacy, connection all come with surrender.
I think, the big problem for entrepreneurs is that, so we get this from, this out of my hands, out of my control thing from our childhood, then from school, society, everything. And then we become entrepreneurs. And I think the way this industry does and the way everybody is just giving you information and steps and systems and processes just
Mm,
reinforces that
yeah,
belief
yeah,
about how things work. Oh, I'm getting these steps. They are very clear. And yet I cannot get the results. And I'm
or
not
I
thinking,
can't get
oh,
myself to do
because
it.
of these underlying, pains and belief, well, it's not working. Now I am out of control.
Yes. And then that not knowing creates such a desperate, like, what I see is a lot of entrepreneurs, they go into like a desperate hustle and they
Yes.
look outside for themselves for solutions.
And because they are trying to control it.
It's like, let me get a grip on this, right?
Yes.
And what I've seen is that when we help someone embody faith and trust so that they can relax and rather than constantly taking action, they can take inspired action.
Yeah.
What very often happens is that people reach out to them out of nowhere. Hey, like, what are you doing now? Like, I've had this one guy really, like, because I worked with a lot of women, and at that point he was the only man in the group, and I kept on like talking about like going into the body, and he came to me for like basically for just learning how to coach, right? So um I kept on like helping him into his body, and he was so in his head and like, what is all this stuff like, where do you feel that in your body? I don't know. And so I helped him. He had a very strong belief in God. And so what he started to realize that his belief in God was very cognitive. And so I
Mm,
helped him embody that faith through building tolerance for the unknown and then helping him get to who he truly is. And what's funny, because like every time I help someone go to their essence and I ask them, like, what is your essence connected to? The answers are always unconditional love, full acceptance, and they use words like life force, God, the universe, creative, like in what is it? Creative intelligence. So like, but no matter what word someone uses, it always comes back to unconditional love. And then all of a sudden they say, I actually love myself here. Or and then I ask, like, what about other people's opinions? Oh my God. It doesn't even, it just like
doesn't
it
exist.
fades away. We don't even, and you like, I used to have to work at helping someone not care about other people's opinions, and now it just dissipates. It's
I
in a
know.
way so wild, because it's like, oh, if I can be in my essence beyond all my societal conditioning, beyond all my stories, beyond all my habitual thoughts and feelings, and really feel into who I am and feel that oneness with whatever that is, whatever word someone has for that, feel that oneness, and then we like uncover, like I call that a statement of faith. Like, what do you now naturally understand here about posting on Facebook or about, like whatever someone is trying to do. And so we create a different connection with that sensation of relaxation in the body so that it can stay relaxed and it doesn't go to, I need to have control over what I don't know or what is not in my control. And that's when things start happening. And it's usually not a strategy, or the strategy comes up just out of creativity because intuition can shine through, creativity can shine through, and people come up with complete like random ideas of how to approach
Mm.
running their business that is aligned with who they are.
Yeah, I at some point when this surfaced for me, what you were talking about, say the fear of rejection, of what others will think, and that doesn't really exist. And I was like, when I felt it myself, I just wanted to shout about it from the rooftops because, oh my God, all these years I've been learning how to push through the fear of rejection, how to be afraid to, I don't know, to do outreach and do it anyway. And then suddenly, oh
Yeah.
God, I do not care. I'm gonna contact whoever I want. I'm gonna say whatever I want. If they are not on board, they're not on board. It's them, this is me, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like
Yeah.
those things don't even exist, so we don't even need to teach people what to do in those kind of situations. We need to help people not to be in those situations. Like to,
Yeah, not like, because the all of those are just symptoms. And
yeah,
what's funny, because oh my God, I for years have had issues with boundaries, right? And I read all the books, Charles Whitfield on boundaries, who like I have like a whole 5 books or something, all on boundaries. And
as
I
in
knew
how to set boundaries.
how to set
You didn't know
boundaries.
how to set boundaries. Guilty.
Like, and I would never do it. I would never do it. Like, or I like, and I knew, okay,
Even
this
if
is how
you
I feel,
knew, yeah, yeah.
and I couldn't. And now with like these shifts, and being more in my essence and being like more, like in a state of I am connected no matter what. My boundaries, my body is talking to me, and it's saying, and it's clear on what I want to say. It's clear on this is a no, leaning in and having challenging conversations, which like the word challenging is not even appropriate anymore. It's just
Mm-hmm.
I'm just sharing my truth, and I can hold however the other person responds. And
Mm.
I feel that so deeply, like in my body. It's wild. Like all this time I've been trying to set boundaries, but from my head, and now the boundaries are just like they come up.
Mm.
I have to think about it. And I
Mm.
think that also in coaching, so often we try to kind of force beliefs, install new beliefs. And my experience is that if you can land in that faith in your essence and feel that oneness, right? So that you can tolerate uncertainty, vulnerability. What happens is that you naturally know things. You naturally align from the inside out with how you want to approach things.
And our body is saying so much when I realize
Yeah.
that I need to sort of pay attention to what my body is doing. Let's say I have a thought, should I do this or that? What do I do next? I almost like feel like my body kind of moves in that direction, which I used to ignore.
Mhm.
I'm almost
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like okay, should I, think about somebody, let's say maybe I should contact them for XYZ. I'm like, and I'm like my almost like my hands are going, moving towards the keyboard or something like that. And so before my logical mind would kick in, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't. Now, oh, my body is moving me already in
Yes,
the direction,
exactly.
so I should do it.
Yeah, exactly. Just, and that's like going with the flow.
Yeah,
Just,
that
yeah,
amazing feeling.
yeah,
Amazing.
it is. I ended up, once I like discovered this and I did some work on myself, I ended up just like creating a journal, like a playbook. And it took me like a week maybe to create it, but it was almost like an out of body experience, just like
Mm-hmm.
the thought, the ideas
Channeling,
just
almost
came,
like channeling.
and just creating it. And there wasn't like that, I need to create this to get clients.
Right,
It's just like I'm just having fun. I'm just being creative.
right. Oh my God. I'm feeling that we're all almost just like scratching the surface. It's been
Yes,
an
yes.
hour already. I'd be talking, about this for much longer. It's so interesting. It's so fascinating. And this is actually the core for me, in my exploration of what it takes to run a business, grow a business from the place of
Yeah,
freedom. You know,
yes.
you know, I I I give people processes, right? I give people steps and systems, but that's not enough. That doesn't do it for me. Not anymore. So it's really cool to have found you, and also
Mhm.
need to do another episode on quantum leaping, what it
Right? Oh my God.
actually is, those kind of things as well.
Yeah.
Because it's part of my lingo and part of what I do as well. So that is such an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for being here with me. And I have three blitz questions that I ask all my guests.
Okay.
Before that, if people want to find you, how do you help people specifically, and where can they connect with you?
Yeah. So my main focus now is with my program, really working with personal transformation, and I work with coaches mainly, but anyone, like I'm open to anyone. But for personal transformation, my website is throw it to the you. So basically throw it to the unknown, throwittotheyou.com. And if they want to email me, femke@throwittotheyou.com. And I also run coach trainings, but people have to really embody this work first before they can come into a coach training with me right now. So, but if they're interested in that, they can also email me.
Yeah, and I love the throw to the you part so much. It's so meaningful for me in many ways. It can be the universe. For me, it's almost like throw to the universe.
Yeah, it's throw
Or
to the
throw it
universe
to the
or the
you,
big you.
or throw to the universe, like your
Yeah,
universe. Think
exactly.
it works so well. So I'm gonna put the links in the show notes anyway,
Okay.
just if they want to just click on them.
Yeah,
Um,
good.
and so the three questions, quick questions, very simple questions. So the first one is, when you hear from grind to grace, what goes through your mind?
Um, First word is relaxation.
Oh,
Yeah,
very good. I love that. That's it. That is
yeah.
it. Yeah.
And what also springs to mind then from grind to grace is patience, right? Patience to wait for inspiration. And so not always having to do. And I see a lot of people struggle with that because of society has put such a value on doing and working, that relaxation, and often in the relaxation inspiration happens.
Say it loud. Say it to the entrepreneurs. How can I relax? How can I be patient?
Yes, but what do I do? But what do I do? Yeah,
I know. It's actually, somebody posted on Facebook, I can remember who, there was a post from one of my connections on Facebook. It takes guts to rest or something like this. It
yeah,
takes guts to rest, which is such a funny observation, right?
yes,
But it's so true.
it is. Yes.
As soon as we try to relax, oh my God, what is not getting done? You know?
And the thing is that when you transcend all of that societal stuff and you're in your essence, it doesn't take guts. It's just natural.
Mm, amazing, amazing. Yeah, very good. Love that answer. The second question is, what change would you like to see in the world?
I would love to see people love each other more, regardless of their political opinions.
Mm.
Um, um, yeah, to move beyond all the dichotomizing, the right, wrong, all of that, and realize that we are all one.
Yes, the left, the right, and then in the middle and
Oh,
whatever.
yeah. And
Yeah, it's crazy when you see that, it's all an illusion, and people
yes,
fighting so much over an illusion.
exactly. And that, years ago, I read that when after conception, like 5 weeks after conception, when the heart is the size of a poppy seed, that's when it starts beating. And it starts beating for everyone out of nowhere. It's tiny and it holds all this potential. And I saw this right before I was going to do my first training, and I was going to have my aunt, my mom, and my stepdad in it. And I was preparing at that time to really be able to provide as a trainer for my stepdad, because him and I have not always had like a, easy connection. And looking through him through those eyes, that his heart started beating the size of a poppy seed.
Mm.
It completely shifted everything, and that he has hopes and dreams, and everyone has that. And if we can see ourselves and everyone as that, no exceptions, then I don't know, we get to like utopia.
Yeah, I love this. I really love, I feel it, right? And just to expand a little bit on the bliss questions, right? I think it's, I think these ideas are expanding. Don't you think so? I think it's
Mhm.
coming. I think it's
I
coming.
have a feeling that it is, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, very cool. Okay, the last one is, what impact do you personally would like to, what impact would you personally like to make on the world?
Um, so years ago, I had this vision of like this globe filled with people, and they were like all gray. And I could see that in my work, right? People are not happy, but it's just the way that it is. That's how life works. And so my vision was to like be able to touch one person and connect them with their own unique light, and turn that light on, and for them then to pay it forward and to go to like 10 other people and turn their lights on, so that they can go to 10 other people and turn their lights on, and together we can kind of make this world shine. And so my, like Alanis Morissette, I'm a huge fan of her. She has this song for her kids. My mission is to keep the lights in your eyes ablaze.
Mm.
And I think that's what I want. I want for people's lights in their eyes to turn back on.
You're
And
doing it. You're doing.
thank you.
You haven't changed just one person's world. You've already touched many people. So yeah, beautiful. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here with me, chatting with me. I think I'm gonna need you again at some point. We
I
have
would
stuff
love
to
to.
talk about.
Oh my gosh, yes, because the quantum leaping is a
Yeah, that.
great
Um,
conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for the listener, if you got value from this, if this was exciting, insightful, share, please follow. This is how we're gonna make this the standard in our industry.
Yeah.
Like I was saying in the beginning, we gotta do it. If not
Yeah.
us, then who?
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. And bye now.